this is Prince from Desi Programmer English YouTube channel, and welcome to this complete video of dot programming language. Well, this video ain't designed for beginners because in this video we're going to have a quick overview of the dot programming language. Now, what I mean when I say that this video ain't designed for beginners is that you should have a prior programming knowledge and you should actually be able to understand pretty much every programming term, like what actually is a comment, what are data types, what is an operation, what are operands, and like what are functions, what is an if statement, and so on. I obviously don't expect you to know dot programming language itself, but what I expect is that you should know any other programming language like C, C++, Python, Java, JavaScript, Go, Erlang, or any such programming language. And if you have ever coded in them, then obviously you can get started from this video. And if not, then I believe you're going to have a pretty tough time by gaining something from this video. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the dot programming language. We will be using dot 2, which is the current stable version right now. And talking about dot, it's a programming language that you use for Flutter. So in a way, this video is just to give you a quick overview of dot programming language. So that when I start Flutter, you should know what actually is going in that framework. Well, to write dot, I won't ask you to install anything in your computer. You can just fire up your browser, whether it's Chrome, Firefox, Opera, or any of such, and just search for this dot pad, which is an online dot compiler from dot programming language itself. You see, I did write some code, but I'll just switch to full screen right now, and I'll increase the font size a bit so that you can see what actually happening right here. So we write code here, our dart code right here, and then the code will be executed and you will see the output in this console right here. So getting started with dot, I won't talk much theoretical. I will just get started with the practical programming paradigm of dot. Well, dot programming language is statically typed, but it has dynamic data types too. Now what that means is that like C and C++ programming languages, we have strict rules for defining variables of any particular data type. But at the same time, like in Python and JavaScript, we have dynamic data types too, which can adapt themselves according to the situations. But before I move on to that, let me tell you what will be a simple structure of any Dart program. Well, unlike in Python, you see that we don't have any main function, but in Dart, a main function is compulsory. So you can have something like a void main, and then your statements go right here. Now, obviously, you know what I have done to these statements. I mean, this is a comment, and in Dart, a single line comment is denoted by just prefixing these two braces, actually slashes right in front of them, and you can have a multiple line comment using the slash, a star, and then you say this is a multiple line comment, and then you end it using a star and a slash, and that's it. Now you can write your statements. Well, let's go. I mean, it was just a pretty quick overview about comments in Dart because we'll be using them a lot. Now, talking about the project structure, actually the program structure of any simple Dart program, then obviously we do need the main function here because the execution begins from the main function itself, just the way it does in C++ and C programs. So all the C and C++ coders, you can easily relate to it. Now, a simple print statement will print anything to the console. I mean, everything that we provide to the print statement as a string. For example, I say, hi there. Obviously, I need another I. Now, in Dart programming language, just the way as we do in C and C++, we need a semicolon at the end. So obviously, a semicolon is necessary, and you would have seen there was an error right here. If I erase the semicolon again, you will see when I run it, we'll get an error, and the error says that, hey, we need a semicolon at the end. So Dart won't forgive you if you just forget to add a semicolon. You should. Now if I run this, I'm using a shortcut key, Control plus Enter, which can be Command for Enter if you're using a Mac. Then you see we get the output right here in the console. This was a pretty basic, simple print statement, and we did learn about comments. Now let's move forward and let's talk about the Dart data types. Now obviously, I did ask and I did expect you be already programmer, so you should know what actual data types. But if you don't know, let me tell you that data types actually define what kind of data is going to be stored in a variable. Now Dart supports data types such as numbers, then we have strings, we have booleans, we have some collections of data types like lists, maps. Don't worry about the errors. Obviously, I'm not typing something that is a valid statement. So yeah, we have things, we have collections like lists and maps, and then we have this pretty amazing dynamic data type. Now what the dynamic data type says is that it will not explicitly define what kind of data will be stored in a variable, whether it's a integer or it's a double or it's a string or it's a boolean, but it will adapt itself according to the situation. Now I'm going to show you all of them one by one. So what I'm going to do first of all is that let me just mark them all as comments. And now let's first talk about numbers. We do have two different kind of numbers. Two different data types of numbers. They are int and double. Well, obviously, again, right here, if you are a C++ programmer, C programmer, or a Java programmer, then you can easily relate to what do I mean when I say int and double. And if you're not, then let me tell you, when you declare a variable using this int keyword, let's say I say int x, then what I mean to say is that any value that is stored in this x should be an integer. Okay, this is what I mean when I say int x, that any value that is stored in this x should be an integer. In the same way, if I say double y, what I mean is that any value that is stored in this y should be a double. In the same way, strings, we have just strings. There isn't any concept of characters and strings. You can store a single character in the string variable itself, and you can store multiple character in the string variable itself. The keyword is capital S T R I N G, string. Then you can give your variable name, let's say S, and then this S variable will store only a string type literals. We have booleans, which is declared using the bool keyword, just the way as in Python. Now, to be honest, in this entire lecture, or you can say in this entire tutorial, while I'm talking about Dart programming language, every time when I see something that I can relate to any of the famous, or you can say most used programming language like C, C++, Java, Python, JavaScript, then I'll make sure that I relate this to them, so that if you are a programmer of that language, or if you have ever written code in that language, then you can easily relate it to. Right now, you see, you can relate to int, double. If you are a programmer in C, C++, Java, you can relate to a string if you are a programmer in C++, Java. But if you are a programmer in Python, you can easily relate to this bool. Again, this bool is used in C++ too, but the kind of C++ that's taught in college don't usually use this bool keyword. Obviously, you can use this bool keyword to declare variables of the data type bool that can hold only two values, either true or false. And let me just say boolean b. And now see, let me just grab your attention to this corner of the screen, and you will see that we get a pretty quick and short documentation about the class boolean. If you select a string, you'll get a quick short documentation about string. You select int, you get a quick short documentation about integer, and so on. So obviously you can make use of it if you ever want to. Now moving further on, lists and map are something that I'll be talking about later on in these videos, because they are obviously, if you are a programmer, you will know that lists are basically just a collection of different of variables of same or different data types. Now what I'm saying, or why I am saying same or different data types, is because in C++ you will see that there are arrays. Arrays are actually a combination of same data type values, and in Python if you see lists, then they are not a combination of values of the same data type. So what happens in Dart in this case is something which is pretty interesting. So I'll talk about them later on in this video itself, so don't worry. Now this dynamic data type is again another interesting part right here in Dart. Obviously it's not the first thing, or I can say that it's not the first time when it's being implemented, but you can use this dynamic keyword to declare a variable which can hold different values of different data types. Now let me just show this everything practically. I'm saying dynamic keyword and I'm using this variable, it's a d. Now what happens right here is, first I will clear everything, but I'll show you that I have this. Okay, let me just use simple indentation. Obviously it's not necessary. I'll say int x is equal to 12. Cool. I'm saying print x. It works pretty fine. We don't have an error. It will print hi there and 12. Cool. But what if I say x is equal to some value like prince, which is a string? Okay. Now run this and you will get an error. It says that hey, we can a value of type string can't be assigned to the variable of type int. Obviously, I did expect you to be a programmer already, so I think that you know what this error is. And what this means is that you cannot assign a value of different data type to a different data type. What this means is that string is a different data type, so an x is a variable of data type int, so you can't assign a value in this case. Well, the same thing applies if I just say double, and double x is equal to, let's say, 12.90. I run this code, it won't throw any error, and you will get the output. Well, pretty quick, right? And this again, 12.909, you'll get the output pretty quick. I'm saying now that we have this x is actually a string which holds a value which is my name. So it's Prince. I run this code and you don't get an error. Fine. And this, let's say it's a boolean. I have bool x is equal to true. Remember, the t will be small letter right here. I mean, unlike in Python, it won't be a capital letter. Just like in C++ and Java, it's going to be a small letter. You see, true. Now what happens? You know what happens when I try to assign this x to a value not of the same data type. For example, if I just say right here that x is equal to 12, run the code and you get an error. Quite obvious, right? Now let me show you what happens when I use a dynamic data type. Fine. I'm saying dynamic x is equal to this value prints. I run this code. I don't get an error. I get my name printed out. Now what I'm saying is that change the value of x to 12 and again print x. Run this code and you will again not get an error. What happens is that since x is a variable of the dynamic data type, at the runtime itself, the x is first verified, or you can say that x is said to be a string. So it adapts all the properties of this string and sets itself to prints. So when this line is executed, we get prints. But in the next line itself, x is said to be 12. So x again adapts itself to be an integer, and then the x is printed out as 12, which is an integer. So this is what happens with the dynamic data type. Well, pretty cool. Now, before I move further with operators and operations, there are two keywords that I want you to know. The first one is the final keyword, and then we have the constant keyword. Actually, the keywords are final, final, and const, const, and I guess you can pretty quick guess what a const keyword does. It declares a constant value. What this means is that I'm saying this int x is equal to, not int x, I'm saying that this constant integer x is equal to 12. I print x, I don't get an error, quite obvious, right? Let's just run this code. Cool. Now what if I try to reassign the value of x? If I say x is equal to 15 now, I run this code and I'll get an error. Because what this line means is that this x is a constant. It's a compile time constant. Remember, a compile time constant means that when you will compile the program, at the same time, the value of x will be set to 12. Now there's another keyword which is final, and what final says is that this too is a constant, but it's a runtime constant. Now what this means is that when I say int y is equal to 13, and then I say int x is equal to y, now this means a runtime constant. Fine. Okay, let me just get rid of this code, run this again, and now this is a runtime constant. Now what this means is that this y is a variable, so at the compile time the value of y may not be fixed. Obviously right here it's fixed, but since this y is a variable, there is no guarantee that at the compile time the value of y will be fixed. So what this final says is that as soon as I get a value for y, I will set the value of x to it, but until or unless I don't get a value for y, my x can change its value. That's what it means right here. But with the const keyword, what it means is that I want a value at the compile time itself. So const integer x can't be y, it can't be a variable, it should be initialized with a constant value, as you can see in this pretty quick documentation that you get in this corner. Well, that was all about const and final keyword in Dart programming language. When talking about operators, you know what operators are, what operands are. So an operator basically defines what kind of operation will be done between two constant or variables. Now there are different operators. Obviously, we have arithmetic operators, relational operators, logical operators, and let's talk about all of them pretty quickly. Now arithmetic operators means they do addition, so they can easily be applied on integers and doubles, Well, there are some exceptions, like we can use the add operator with the strings too for concatenation, and that's pretty simple stuff. So let me just use two variables. I have integer x is equal to 12 and I have this int y is equal to 6. Oh, let's say just 2. Now I have this int z is equal to these two variables x and y. What I'm going to do right here is that I'm going to do operations, and I will show you what different operators mean, and then I will print the value of z. So let's just get started. The first one is plus. Obviously, you know what it does. It just adds the two numbers and you'll get the output 4. Cool. The second one is minus. You know what this does. If you just run this code, it will just subtract the values and you'll get the output. The third operator is actually a unary operator, which means it just reverses. I mean, unary operator doesn't mean that it reverses the value, but unary operator means that it doesn't need two variables to work on. So what this means is that integer z is equal to, when I say something like minus x, what this means is that it will take the value of x and then it will add a minus to it. Now what this means is that right now the value of z will be minus 12, and if I already set the value of x to minus 12, then the value of z will be 12. So it just prefixes, or in better mathematical words, it multiplies the value with a negative sign. The next one is a multiply, and I know, but and I guess you know what that means. Int z is equal to x multiplied by y, and you get the output. That's a multiplication. Now, talking about division, there is a simple thing that you need to understand and need to remember is that this single slash, which is the division operator, will not always give you an integer value, and actually it will always give you a double value. You can see this error in this corner. It says a value of type double can't be assigned to a variable of type int. What this means is that if this would have been a double, and if I run this code, you will see that the output is 6. Now, even though this 6 is an integer, but what this operator says is that I may throw a double, so you need to provide a double. Now, if you want to make sure that what this throws is an integer, you have to add a tilde sign. Now, this sign is at the top of your keyboard, beside the beside the 1, and you have the tilde sign, and then there is this comma. It's not actually comma, it's apostrophe. And so, yeah, you just have to use this tilde sign with this slash operator, and what it says is that whatever the value of x and y be, after the division I want just the integer. Now if I run this, you will see that the value is 6. Now I think you are pretty much sure what it means if I will have a value like a 13, and if I just run this code, you will see that I will get 6 again. But if I just removed it tilde, and if I just make this int double, then I won't get an integer. I'll actually get a double value that will be 6.5, and I hope that you knew it already. So moving forward, the modulus operator is still the same. It will return the remainder if the division is not successful. So if I run this right here, you will see that the output is 1. If I make this 12, then obviously the output will be 0 because the remainder is 0. Then we have this increment and decrement operator, just the way we had in C and C++. So if I say int z is equal to x plus plus, what that means is that increase the value of x by 1. But right here you will see that the value is not increased, and if you're already familiar with postfix and prefix, you might understand this. If you're not, yeah, let me tell you that right now I'm using postfix, and what this means is that after executing this line, increase the value of x by 1. So at this line the value of x is 12 itself, but after this line, if I use any variable, like if I say integer y is equal to x, even x, then you will see that now y will be 13. I'll run the code, and okay, do I have an error? It says that error compiling to JavaScript. Y is already declared, sorry. So integer a is equal to x, and I'm trying to print a, not z. So you will see that I get 13. What that means is that after this line, the value of x has been increased by 1. So at this point of time, or at this line, the value of x is already 13, even without adding the plus plus operator. Now this is postfix. What prefix means is that the value of x will be increased at that line itself. Now if I use this, then the value of z will become 13 right now. right now. You can see the value of x is 13, because what this means is that it's postfix. As soon as you come to this line, first increase the value of x to 13, then do this or like execute this code. Moving forward, the same, we do have decrement operator 2, which will just decrease the value by 1. And you know what postfix and prefix will do even if we use the decrement operator. Now talking about the relational operator and the equality operator, again we have the pretty much same operator that we use in any other programming language. Now I'll just list all the operators because there's nothing new, so I don't think that we do need to explain each and every one of them. We have the greater than operator, we have the less than operator, we have the greater than equal to operator, we have the less than or equal to operator. Come on, what happened to this? It's not a constant. Then we have the double is equal to, which is equality operator. It will test for equality. Then we have the exclamation and is equal to, which means that it's a not equal to operator. And you know how what they mean and how to use them, because I already said that I expect you to be a programmer. I don't expect you to be a newbie or novice and you say that hey, I don't even know what relational operators are. Going forward, we do have two test operators in Dart, and these could be used to test whether a value is of a particular data type or not. What it means is that if I say that I have this int y is equal to 12 and I try to print things like y is int, it will print true or false according to the condition. Now what I say is that if y is integer, I mean y check if y is integer. Since it's an integer, it printed true. We do have y is and then a semicolon, which means that if y is check if y is not an integer, then you will get false, which means no, y is an integer. You are giving us the wrong statement. So yeah, this just checks the data type in Dart is and is not. It's a pretty simple abbreviation of is not, is and the operator that we mostly use for not, that is exclamation mark, so is not. Now assignment operators are in Dart too. Assignment operators are not something that you will see in C++, but yeah, I have seen them in Python. I mean, maybe they do exist in C++ and in Java, but in Python, we do have assignment operators. And what that means is that you can write things like integer x is equal to 12, and then I have things like integer y is equal to 13, and I have this integer z, and I can do things like z plus is equal to x. What this means is that z is equal to z plus x. Now listing all the assignment operators at once, we have the is equal to, which is simple assignment. Then we have this plus is equal to, which is it add and assign. In the same way, we have minus is equal to, which means subtract and assign. We have multiply is equal to, we have divide is equal to, and we have this another special operator, that is question mark is equal to. And what this says is that assign the value if the variable is null. So I mean, if you just declare a variable, let's say it is a z, now that is a null, I mean that doesn't hold any value. So you can say things like int z is question mark is equal to 13. What that means is that if a z doesn't hold any pre-value, then just assign this value. That's pretty simple. And we have logical operators too. We have the AND operator, we have the OR operator, and we have the NOT operator. Same as we have in C++ and Java. So I don't think that you're going to have any problem with them. But I will be talking about them, relational operators too, as soon as we come to decision making, decision constructs, that is the if statements and if else statements. Well, decision statements are very important in any kind of programming language because they are used pretty much and can be used to evaluate any kind of Boolean expression. So I think that you're already familiar with what if statements are, what if and else statement is, what an if else ladder is, what a nested if else statement is. But I will actually discuss about the syntax and we will run some few codes. So a simple if statement will hold a syntax as in dot, where we have if, then we will have expression, and then we will have the code in brackets, I mean in parentheses. Obviously you can avoid them, but in flower brackets, obviously you can avoid these flower brackets, but you know what happens if you avoid these flower brackets, then the code that's in the next line of if statement only gets executed. And if you want to use a block of code that's multiple statements, then you will have to use this block of code, this blocking of code that we do using flower brackets. Now how can I write the simple one? Let me just do, I have things like integer x is equal to 12, and this is a pretty simple program of just finding even and odd. I know you would have done it multiple times. What I'm saying is that if x percent 2 is equal to 0, then just print that this is a even number. Remember this semicolon at the end, I may miss it, and you see we get an even. At the same time, we have an else statement too, and an else statement runs if the if statement and the expression in the if statement doesn't evaluate to true. So here we will be printing print odd. Again, just don't forget the semicolon at the end, and if I change the value of x to 13, which is an odd number, then we'll see the output as odd. So this is the pretty simple syntax. We have if, then we need a boolean expression, and then we do have all our statements. We can have an optional else, and then all our statements. Again, an else can contain an if block, and if I just something like if this x is greater than 10, then print greater, and now when I run this code, it will print greater and odd, both of them. So obviously this is nesting of statements one within the another. And an else if ladder is same in Dart as it is in C++. I mean, just in Python we don't have elif. The logic is obviously same in all the programming languages. What we have to see right here is the syntax, and the syntax is we have else space if, and then else if print odd, and then again we can have multiple else if. Obviously there is no limitation, it will just keep continuing. Remember, we do need a boolean expression after this else if too, and then at the end we have this optional else that will be executed if none of the boolean expressions evaluate to true. That's pretty basic stuff in if else statements that I believe you two already know. Moving next to loops, we do have definite and indefinite loops. Obviously, definite and indefinite loops are not like finite and infinite loops. There is a difference between definite, indefinite, and finite and infinite loops. But let's just talk about the first and the most interesting, most used looping construct. That's the for. We have the same syntax of for as we had in C++ and Java. To be honest, Dart is pretty much same as C++, but at least these basic data types, these decision constructs, these looping constructs, they are pretty much same as in C++. So we have for, then we have the initial value, we will have INITIEL initial value, then we will have the termination condition, then we will have the what we call it as step, and here we can have our block. What this means, pretty simple. Let's say that I have this int I is equal to 1, and I'm saying I don't even need this right here, to be honest. Let's just write the code here itself. I'm saying for some integer I that is right now 0 till this I is less than or equal to 10, just increase the value of I, and right here just print the value of I. Run this code and you will see that we get an error. Cool. Why did we actually get an error? It said that I is less than, okay, I should not have used the spaces. Let's run this again. You will see 1 0 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10. So we did use loop to run this same print statement multiple times with changed values, and this is what loops do. We can execute a same block of code multiple times, just if the conditions are correct. Then we have the while loop, do while loop, obviously with the same meaning and pretty much same syntax. The while loop has a syntax of while, then we have this expression, and then we have the statements. You know how to use the while loop, I know. I know that you know. Then we have the do while loop with again the pretty much same syntax as we had in C++. First we have the do, then we have the statements. Just pardon me if I type the spelling of syntax statements wrong. Then we have the while, then we have the condition, or you can say the expression. So this is the syntax of a while loop in Dart, while expression statements, and this is the syntax of the do loop in Dart, do statement condition. Now again, if you're thinking of writing comments like, hey, why don't you explain how this while loop will work and how this do while loop will work? So let me tell you, I have already told in the very beginning of this video that this video is not for beginners. This is like a crash course for all those people who already know programming, who have written code in any programming language, whether it's C, C++, Python, Java, JavaScript, and now they just want to move to Dart, they just want to use Flutter. So they can just watch this video, learn about the pretty basic syntax of Dart and how things are in Dart, and they can easily relate it to some all the prior knowledge, and then they can get started with Flutter very soon. And if you're thinking whether you can learn Dart as your first programming language or not, then obviously you can learn Dart as your first programming language. But to be very honest, even if you search for tutorials online, you won't find some very beginner tutorials in Dart where they keep explaining like what a loop does, what a decision construct does, and so on. So make sure that you know any other programming language if you want to be benefited from this video. Moving further, we did talk about what loops are, the for loop, the while loop, and do while loop. Now is the time that I'm going to talk to you about collections. Now, I'll first talk about lists, and this is the point where we do have to talk a lot about list, because I can't easily ask you to relate this to any programming language, whether it's Python, Java, C++, or any, because things are pretty much different in Dart. Not very much, just a little. So now in Dart, we have two types of lists. Okay, the first one is a fixed length list, and we have some growable list. First, let's talk about a fixed length list, and then we will talk about growable list. What a fixed length list says is that we cannot resize it, and trying to resize it will cause an exception. How they declared is that we do have our var, then we have this list name. Let's say that my list name is L, and then we say new, which is, and then we say list, which is a class, and then we give the initial size, let's say 2. Okay, now you might be wondering what this var keyword actually is. Well, to be honest, the var keyword in Dart is almost like dynamic, but it's not dynamic, because if I try to talk about the var keyword for just a couple of minutes, I will say that if I say var x is equal to 12, fine. If I just run this, you won't see an error. If I print x, you won't see an error. You will see an error because I did forget the semicolon at the end, but now you won't see an error. What happens is that if I try to reassign the value of x to something like 15, you won't see an error. Cool. Obviously you should not see an error, but as soon as I try to reassign the value of x to Prince, what happens is that it throws an error. It says, hey, a value of type string can't be assigned to a value of type int. So although it's not static, it's not dynamic, but it is static. And what this says is that the first value that you assign to a variable of var data type, that value or the data type of that value will be accepted as a data type of the variable. What this means in simple words is that right here I assigned a value of 12 to x. So now this x is a variable of type int. If I would have just assigned Prince, okay, at the very beginning, just forgive me for my spelling, and if I run the code again, you will see that it prints Prince. But if I again say something like x is equal to 12, it will throw us an error saying, hey, you can't assign a value of type int to a variable type string. And don't bash saying that, oh, come on, this x was a string, integer, but now it's a string, because this is how it works. The kind of value that you assign at the very first will be accepted as a final data type or value. It's not a value, a data type for the variable. Now let's move forward. We have this var, then we have my list name. Let's say my list is equal to a new list, and then I give it a size, let's say 2. Run this code, it won't throw an error. Now obviously you will talk about things like how we can create a list. We did create a list. Now we have to talk about how we can add values, how we can gain dot values. Then adding a values in this list is again pretty simple. You can say things like my list, and then you can index it out like my list dot 0 is equal to 12. Print my list run this code, you'll get an output of 12 and null, because obviously by default the values are null in dot. And if I say things like my list 3 is equal to 13, then it will again throw an exception and error, because I already told you that the index will be out of range. I did already told you that this is a fixed length list. So this is how you assign a value. This is the same way you retrieve a value. Now let's talk about growable lists. So a growable list is growable list. Okay, a growable list is not growable list. Actually, a growable list can change its length at runtime itself. So how do we create them? Pretty simple. The first one way of creating them is that we have var, then we have the list name, let's say my list, and then we give a few values to them. Let's say I just give a value of 12 and 13. Now if I run this, you won't see an error, obviously. If I say things like print my print my list, you will see that it prints 12, 13. If I say things like my list, and if I add a value to the second index of, let's say 15, run this code, and it will say an error. What happens? It says that, hey, your index is out of range. Now I know that if I would have been in a class right in front of you, then you would have just stood to ask me that, hey, you just told that this is a growable list and now it says index out of range. How could this happen? But don't worry, I know I'm not right in front of you at this moment, but I will answer this because I know this is the question that you get, and I know that this is what we do when we think that a list is growable. Well, obviously this list is growable, but we can't add a value to this list at any random index. What this means is that by default I gave it only two positions. I gave it only a length of 2. So I can change the value at 0th index to be anything. If I say things like at 0 it's 20, I run the code, it won't throw an error because I'm just changing the value. Obviously, since I'm using the print my list, before changing the value, we will see 12 and 13. But if I try to add a value, then I have to use this add method, and then I say anything like 15. Now what this does is that it adds the value of 15 at the end of the list. If I again use the print my list statement, then you will see that now we get an output of 12, 13, 15. Pretty cool, right? So although it's a growable list, doesn't mean that you can add a value at any index. You will have to use this add method, and this add method will add a value at the end of the list, extending the length of the list by 1. I know I'm reading this from this sort documentation, don't worry. Now moving further, I did tell you that this is one way or of creating. Another step of creating this growable list is that we use this var, then we use this list name. Let's say that the list name is again my list, and here we say new list. You will be like, hey, this was the same method that you did tell us in the fixed length list also. Obviously this is the same method. The only difference is that right now you don't pass a value which will be the length, the default length. So when you don't pass a value, it becomes a growable list. Now in this list too, again, you can't do things like my list 0 is equal to 12. No, it's going to throw an error. Okay, what you can do is that you can use the add method to add an value. So if I say things like my list dot add and 12, then this won't throw an error. Come on, this will throw an error because I did had a typo. Obviously this won't throw an error. I'm not using any print statement, so don't always keep looking at the console for something. If you don't see an error, that too means that something is working. So this is how lists in Dart work. Now if you're wondering what this list can contain, obviously I did tell you that I have talked or I have seen two different type of lists, although you can call them array and list. Many people think that array and list are different, but actually in some books they say that an array in Python and array in C++. This could be a topic of debate, but not right now. So a list in Dart can contain values of different data types. What that means is that now this is a this is my list, and I did say my list dot add 12, it is an integer, but this doesn't mean that my list dot add and my name, which is a string, will throw an error. No. Run the code and you will see that this doesn't throw an error. I can even use a print statement to print the complete list, and you will see that it does prints both the values at once quite very comfortably. So this list contains values of different data types. Now you might be wondering that, hey, what do I do if I have to create an array in Dart? And that's where this, I said, interesting part of Dart comes, because in Dart we can create a list or an array of similar data types and also of different data types. Although Dart doesn't says that it's an array, Dart says that this combination of values of different data types is a list. I repeat, according to Dart, this combination of values of different data types is a list. But if I strictly try to create a combination of values of the same data type, then Dart calls that as generics. And I'm talking about generics, but first I'll talk about maps. Now, talking about maps, maps are actually a combination of key value pair, and if you're a Python programmer, you can relate to them because they are just like dictionaries as in Python. If you're a Java programmer, you can again relate to them. But I'm sorry if you're a C or C++ programmer, because you can't easily relate to maps. But let me tell you a very different way of explaining maps or dictionaries. I mean, again, I don't think that you guys are novice, so you already know what actually are lists and maps, but maps and dictionaries. But let me put this right in front of you the way that I used to understand maps and dictionaries at the very beginning, that maps and dictionaries are two just like lists. The only difference is that in lists we don't do indexing on our own, but in maps and dictionaries we have this extra benefit of doing indexing on our own. I mean, in lists, the indexing it starts from 0, then it goes at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and so on. Where in maps, the indexing starts with our own values. I mean, it could be like 0, it could be like name, address, date of birth, so on. So let me show you how it does in Dart. So creating a list in Dart is again very simple. We do have two methods. The one is you simply assign some values to a map, and that becomes a map. The second one is that you use a constructor to create a map. Let me show you both of them. I'm saying var map1 is equal to, and in this curly braces I'm saying that name, then colon, then I have prince, and then again a comma that I'm saying channel, and then colon, then I'm saying Desi Programmer. And what this means is that this is come on what this means is that this map1 is a map that contains key value pair. Name is a key, value is prince, channel is a key, value is Desi Programmer. So if you want to get some value from this map, I will say print, I'm just try to printing the value, so print map1, and then we need the value, so the value is name. Now remember, the value should be used in the same way they are. I mean, since they are a string, I'm using a string. If this would have been a integer, I would have used an integer without these quotes. Again, I said things like channel, then you will see the output as Desi Programmer. Obviously, quite obvious. This is how lists work. Now another way of creating, or you can say defining a list, is using the constructor, which is var map2 is equal to new map, and this 2 defines, or you can say declares a map, and you can again use this new map to add values. The way you do is pretty much same. I mean, there is nothing like in lists where you have a problem. You can do things like map2, you can provide a value, let's say jobs is equal to, let's say I'm talking about jobs, so map2 jobs is equal to an empty an empty value. Run this, it won't throw an error, and I can again get this from print map2, and the key is jobs. Run this, and you will see here output, which is empty. I mean, empty is not the output, empty is a string, which is the output. Now I did tell you that I'll be talking about generics, but I'll first talk about maps. And if you still remember what generics were, then it's good. And if you don't remember, then generics were a list of fixed data type. And how do we declare and use them? That's pretty easy. We first use the list, then in angle brackets, we declare the data type. So let's say int. Then we give this a list name. Let's say my list. and then we say that this is a new list. Now what this means is that this my list will contain multiple values, but all of them must be integer. If I try to do things like my list dot add 12 and then I say print my list, run this code and you will get a value of 12. Now don't worry if you just worry from this statement why I'm using add. I did already tell you that this using this way we create a growable list, and a growable list can be initialized, or you can set values to a growable list. In better words, you can append values to a growable list using the add method itself. But what happens right here is that when I use this add method on my list, but I try to add a value which is a string, I run this code and this code throws an error. It says, hey, you can't assign a value of a string to an integer. In a way, this means the same. Don't worry about this argument and parameter word. So this is what happens when you create a generic. This is what a generic is. It's a list of same data type, a combination of same data type. You can say that it's an array as in C or C++, but as in C or C++, it's not easy to create. In C or C++, it was just int, and you have, like your the data type, sorry, the list name, and then you just say is equal to an empty list or an list with some initial length. But here you will have list, then in angle brackets you say the data type, then you will give the list name, and then you say that this is a new list. Now moving forward, we have to talk about functions. Now what functions are? Obviously I pretty much expect you to already know what functions are. Just the way the main is a function, we do have many functions. Some are predefined by other programmers which we use, like this print function, which is predefined, so we just pass some arguments and that is printed on the screen as it is. Now we can again code our own functions to do the job. There are pretty much very advantages of using functions, clean code, multiple uses and so on. But yeah, this is not a theory class, so I won't be talking about things like what are the advantages of functions and so on. Let's first talk about what actually functions are. So now, how do we use functions in Dart? We know what functions are. Functions are actually a block of code which can be executed by just using the function name, and they can be called and executed multiple times. How do we use a function in Dart? Well, you can relate to functions in any programming language, C, C++, Python, Java, JavaScript, because there is a small difference, and the difference is that you don't use you don't define a function, you directly declare it and you directly call it. In C and C++, we have this benefit of defining a function, but we don't have the benefit right here. So one type of declaring a function is that you just give your function name. I just say hi, and then I say print hi, and if I just run this code right here, I say hi, run this code, and it will say hi. It will just print hi. So this one is that you just give your function name, this is small brackets, flower brackets, and that's it. Another way is that you give it a return type. A void return type means that this function won't return any value, and int return type means that this function will return integer value. Double return type means this function will return a double value. If I say something like a string say hi and it won't print hi, it will, let's say it print hi, then it returns this value which is Prince, that's my name. And if I'm saying something like say hi, I will say hi will just print the hi, then I'm saying print say hi, run the code, and it will give us an output of hi print. So the first time I say hi, it says hi. Second time I say print say hi, it executes this function, it says hi, and then it prints the value that we are returning from this function, that's prints. So this is how we can use functions in Dart, either just the function name and so on, or a return type of the function and so on. We can pass parameters. Obviously they are same as we did in other programming languages. Let's say I accept two parameters. We do have to say what are the data type of the parameter that I'm accepting. So let's say I'm accepting two parameters, integer x and integer y, and I have to do this pretty simple stuff, that is I have to say something that integer z is equal to x plus y, and then I will print this z. I want to return this z. I mean, I know that you know that we can return this z. Now this is a void function, and I'm saying, not saying print say hi, I'm saying in this say hi give two values 12, 13. Run this code, it will add the values together and will give the output on the console, that is 25. Very simple. Now one different type of function in Dart are these arrow functions. Now arrow functions are just, I mean, arrow function is just a concise way of representing a function. They do not contain too many statements, just a few of them, and you can just use them in the same way as they are. The only difference is that, I mean, this simple difference is that you don't have to use flower brackets to enclose a block or a statement. Let's say that I have a void main and it says print hello, and then I have a function that is, let's say, void say hi, and this say hi function is actually saying print hi, and don't forget the semicolon. Run this code, you won't see an error. I mean, obviously you did see this hello on the console because I used the print statement. Now if I say something like say hi, you will see that this does the same thing that we expect a function to do, a simple function to do. It prints hi on the screen. So it's just a concise way of representing function. If your function contains just a single, or like, just a couple of line of codes, you can use this arrow function to represent functions. And I did show you how can we use parameters in function. Well, this is it for this video right now, because in next video I'm going to talk about classes and objects in Dart. And to be honest, that again like 30 minutes, or like that could be a 40 to 45 minutes of video, because classes and objects are very important if you're going to work with Flutter. So obviously these things were actually pretty basics that you can just nail down even from the internet. I know this, but if you have benefited from this video, then just let me know, and just give me a couple of days and I'll be uploading this another video where I'll be talking about classes and objects, that is object oriented programming paradigm in Dart programming language itself. And then we will move to Flutter very soon. So I'll catch you up soon in the next video. Till then, you can use this Dart pad, which is an online resource to execute your Dart code from the developers of Dart itself. Don't worry, it's not a third party application kind of thing. So keep writing your code, and if you're new on this channel right here, consider subscribing to us. Hit like on this video if you like that, and the rest of it, I'll catch you up soon.